typical for us to be very quiet at times, but I think it's very fitting that when a guest has travelled from at least over state borders, that we should give our warmest welcome. Luke Barnes is a well-known astrophysicist, and you might think, gee, what is that? Well, I'll let him explain it, because I have no idea. But he would be considered a world expert on particularly the theme of the fine-tuning of our universe. And so I've done videos on our YouTube channel exploring that. You could plumb the depths of it. It's a fascinating subject of how, at the base of nature, it really does give us a reason to think that there is a mind, a God behind all of it, that you're an intended part of this incredible universe that we inhabit. As I shared, he's also heavily involved in his own local church and just loves helping young people explore and understand the Bible. And so it's my enormous privilege to introduce my friend, Luke Barnes. Let's give him a round of applause.
Thanks, mate. Well, thank you so much for having me. It's a real privilege to give a sermon at any church, so I'm delighted to be here. Yes, I am an astrophysicist. No, I won't be boring. It's all right. It's going to be okay. The topic I was given was, as perhaps seen on the posters, was the heavens declare the glory of God. Those words, as you well know, come from Psalm 19. So why don't we start there, he said, being a bit less organised than I should have been. Excellent. The heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech. Night after night they reveal knowledge. They have no speech. They use no words. No sound is heard from them, yet their voice goes out into all the earth, their words to the ends of the world. What I really want to focus on today is, well, that for a lot of us is a very sort of almost religious experience, like to see the full night sky in all of its glory. In fact, there's an old joke about my profession. If you're ever at a party and you want people to talk to you, just introduce yourself as an astronomer. And if you are at a party and you don't want people to talk to you, introduce yourself as an astrophysicist. When I tell people that I'm an astronomer or an astrophysicist, I get a variety of responses. The worst of them, of course, is, oh, you're an astronomer. I'm a Capricorn. Get out. No. But quite often I get someone who just has to tell me this story, that they, whatever it is, whatever circumstance, however they set it up, they're out in the wilds of Botswana, or they're on a beach somewhere, or I had one guy who was in the British Navy. He was a submariner. And so he went down in submarines. He was telling these stories about tracking Russians underneath the ice caps. And then, what do you do, Luke? Oh, I'm an astronomer. And he said, oh, when you're tracking the Russians, there's not much to do at night, and you're out in the sort of North Sea somewhere. So all the men, if the submarine happened to be on the surface, you got up on the surface of the submarine, put on some warm clothes, and you just stared at the night sky. These stories that people just have to tell me always end with, and then I saw the stars. And that's the point the story ends at, because they lose the words after that. They realize, actually, I can't tell you what that experience is like unless you've seen it yourself. But remember, for David, not living under the grotesque tragedy that is streetlights, the night sky was a daily or nightly thing for them. It wasn't this rare event of being able to see a completely dark night sky. That was just the world that they lived in. And let's head back there. That's a good idea. Let's turn off some more streetlights. When the Psalms point to the heavens, they don't mean, once in your lifetime you might have this amazing religious experience. It's supposed to be a constant reminder of God. And that's part of science I want to sort of talk to you about today. One piece of the sort of puzzle of the way that God's truth encompasses all truth. I want to talk to you about the laws of nature. There will be no equations. It's all right. It's going to be okay. My job isn't just to look at the universe, although that's a big part of it. It's a lot of fun. My job is to work out how it fits together, how it works. And we've noticed, scientists, over the last couple of centuries, that the universe keeps doing the same thing. There are patterns. There are repetitions. If you drop something, it falls. If you drop it, it falls again. There's a thing called gravity out there. And as we look closer at the universe, there's patterns that weren't obvious on the surface. For example, because we're going around the sun, hopefully you all knew that, at different times of the year, the night sky is the part of the sky that points away from the sun. So if the sun's here and the Earth's over here, the night sky are those stars, right? Whereas, wait 6 months, sun's here, Earth's here, the night sky is those stars over there. What that means is if you're very careful and you watch the sky closely enough and you make notes and you make comparisons, the night sky is your calendar. So for the ancient world, if you wanted to know what day of the year it is, if you were good enough at your astronomy, you could work it out from the night sky. But there's another part of nature which knows what time of year it is. The seasons are known to plants, and plants are important because we eat them. So at some point, some human in history worked out that there's a connection between the stars and the stuff that we eat, which is an unusual thing to work out and doesn't make a whole lot of sense as how do the plants know about the stars? But that's the way the world works. There are patterns behind the scenes that are there in nature, and science is the search for those patterns. If we can see how the repetitions, the everyday repetitions, not the once-in-a-lifetime events, but the everyday repetitions of nature speak of the Creator, we'll have a constant reminder of God's faithfulness, and we should live in a perpetual state of gratitude to Him, because the repetitions of nature are all around us. I say this because, in particular, sometimes the opposite seems to be true. The laws of nature, God's patterns in God's creation, seem to have been used against us. Apparently, supposedly, the fact that nature, it follows patterns, shows that the universe runs itself. It doesn't need a creator or a sustainer. It's just like a big clock. It just keeps going, wind it up and away it will go. Maybe there's a bit of randomness thrown in, but whatever the case, the world just keeps ticking over. G.K. Chesterton, who I'll mention a few times here, is a writer from about a century ago. You should read Orthodoxy by G.K. Chesterton, absolutely necessary reading. He identified the sort of unspoken assumption behind this idea. Quote, "If a thing goes on repeating itself, it's probably dead. A piece of clockwork." Now, when you put it like that, it's pretty obvious it doesn't actually follow. There's other reasons why things repeat. Parents, for example, you will know that if the kitchen is in good, logical working order, it didn't do it by itself. That's not how the kitchen works. Right? Sometimes I hear even Christians talk as if the laws of nature, if they're running the show of reality, it's a bit like God letting the TV babysit the kids. Just shows He's taken His hands off. And I want to say it's exactly the opposite. Science is describing what God is constantly doing. So, why does nature keep repeating? How can we understand this fact about the world around us? If it doesn't mean that it's a dead mechanism, what does it mean? Well, we know from experience why some things keep on repeating. Growing up in a church, we had the evening service, and before that there was a light supper. So as a kid, I would turn up, and every week there was a repetition. The same thing kept happening every week. There was always a plate of little pancakes, like pikelets, right, with jam and cream on them. They were there every week. Right? Does that mean that there must have been a pikelet-creating mechanism which just ran itself? No. It's not evidence of that. It's evidence of faithfulness. It's not a blind mechanism. It's a saint. Her name is Lillian Irvine, Mrs. Irvine, right? An absolute legend, the church treasurer, church organist, with a soprano that could raise the dead. And If you're imagining a lady sort of peeking over those little half glasses at you like this, then you've got an exact picture of what's going on there. Not a blind mechanism, the faithfulness of Mrs. Irvine. Took the kids, I grew up in Maxville in New South Wales, if you know it. We were back there on a holiday at the start of the year, so I took the kids back to my old church. We all, the family, sat down in the row, and a familiar voice from behind me was heard to say, "Well, I hope that Luke Barnes is going to behave himself today." I thought, "Yes, Mrs. Irvine." Still funny. Psalm 85. If you've got your Bibles open, why not turn to Psalm 85, verse 9. Where it says this: "Surely his salvation is near to those who fear him, that his glory may dwell in the land. Love and faithfulness meet each other. Righteousness and peace kiss each other. Faithfulness springs forth from the earth, and righteousness looks down from heaven. The Lord will indeed give what is good. Our land will yield its harvest. Righteousness goes before him and prepares the way for his steps." That line in verse 11 that I want to focus on, the psalmist is thankful to God for the harvest, for supporting, for preserving them, for feeding them. Why does nature repeat? Why do plants keep growing out of the ground? Well, verse 11, faithfulness springs forth from the earth. Faithfulness literally grows out of the ground. Why are there repetitions in nature? Because God is faithful. The natural processes by which plants grow and the faithfulness of God are the same thing, looked at from different angles. The consistency of the laws of nature is the faithfulness of God. The patterns behind the universe reflect the patterns in the mind of its creator. The laws of nature are there because God is there, faithfully sustaining. So when Jesus wants to teach us about God's care for us in Matthew 6, he turns not to rare things, but to the everyday things of nature. Matthew 6:28, "Why do you worry about clothes? See how the flowers of the field grow. They do not labor or spin. Yet I tell you that even Solomon, in all his splendor, was not dressed like one of these. If that is how God clothes the grass of the field, which is here today and tomorrow thrown into a fire, how much more will he clothe you, O you of little faith? Where will you see the faithfulness of God? In every flower, everywhere." So if we can learn to see that, we'll have a constant reminder of God's faithfulness to us. Note that Jesus is not saying that flowers are some sort of miracle. They don't have to break the laws of nature to show God's faithfulness. No, it's the constancy of the laws by which flowers grow that is both the reason we can understand it scientifically and why they represent God's faithfulness to us. These things are not in tension with each other. They are the same thing. Jesus doesn't have to say, "Look at the flowers. Scientists don't know how they grow." That's not the method he uses. But there's another reason why things keep repeating. The first one was the faithfulness of God. Here's a second one. This comes from G.K. Chesterton again. But think about your experience. You'll know of things in your life that keep repeating. A similar repetition that keeps ringing in your ears. You'll especially know this if, like me, you are a big uncle. I have kids and brothers and sisters, and they have kids. I have a bunch of nieces and nephews. There's about 10 of them. I don't know, you lose count after a certain point. Most of them are under 10 years old. If I lined them all up and said, "Hey guys, here's your options for today. We can take you to Wet n Wild, one of the greatest theme parks in the world. You can go on all the slides, all the rides. There's just an amazing amount of things there to do. That's option number one. Or option number 2, over there's a perfectly normal backyard swimming pool. I'll be standing in it, waist deep in water, and I will be ready to rumble. Let's go. Let me tell you, Wet n Wild does not win that one. I win that one, right? They would rather rumble with me than basically anything else. And if you're a big uncle and you've ever stood in a pool, you did not stand in that pool for long before someone tried to climb you. If you know this, you'll know that kids have an infinite capacity for the same thing to keep happening because they know the rules of the game. The rules of the game are if enough of us climb on top of Uncle Luke, he will fall over, splash into the water, and we'll all fall off. But if Uncle Luke gets a hold of us, he's going to throw us towards the deep end as hard as he can. Right? He's going to make some reference to some movie that we don't even understand, but he's clearly just entertaining himself. No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to fly. And that, if I let it happen, would literally happen all day. I could turn up at 9 a.m. in the morning and still be going at 5 in the afternoon, as that constant reminder, a constant echo in my ears of, do it again, do it again, do it again. Here's Chesterton. Because children have abounding vitality, because they are in spirit fierce and free, therefore they want things repeated and unchanged. Do it again, they always say, and the grown-up person does it again until he is nearly dead. He wrote that 100 years ago, so this is a pretty... Here's his point. For grown-up people are not strong enough to exult in monotony, but perhaps God is strong enough to exult in monotony. It's possible that God says every morning, do it again to the sun, and every evening, do it again to the moon. It may not be automatic necessity that makes all daisies alike. It may be that God makes every daisy separately, but has never got tired of making them. There's a picture in Proverbs 8 of God delighting in his creation, God's wisdom especially. Right? I was there, says Proverbs 8. God's wisdom saying, I was there when he set the heavens in place, when he marked out the horizon of the face of the deep. Then I was constantly at his side. I was filled with delight day after day, rejoicing always in his presence, rejoicing in his whole world, delighting in mankind. There's a particularly memorable passage about this, which I'm going to share. Another book you have to read is The Divine Conspiracy by Dallas Willard. Right, write that down. Divine Conspiracy, Dallas Willard. He tells the story of his first trip to South Africa, that he went to a beach. Now, he'd been to beaches before, but there was something about this one that was just stunning, just took his breath away almost. And as he's standing there looking at this just sublime beauty in God's creation, quote, gradually there crept into my mind the realization that God sees this all the time. He sees it, experiences it, knows it from every possible point of view, this and billions of other scenes like it and unlike it, in this and billions of other worlds. Great tidal waves of joy must constantly wash through his being. Perhaps it's strange to say, but suddenly I was extremely happy for God and thought that I had some sense of what an infinitely joyous consciousness he is, and of what it might have meant to look at his creation to say that it is very good. We pay a lot of money to get a tank with a few tropical fish in it and never tire of looking at their brilliant iridescence and the marvelous forms and movements. God has seas full of them in which he constantly enjoys. This is God delighting in doing it again. Why are there so many trees? Because God keeps saying, do it again. He has not gotten tired of the beauty of his creation. We get tired and bored of things. That is not what God is like. We have to keep reminding ourselves. In Deuteronomy 6, Moses commands the Israelites, the command that Jesus says is the most important. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. And then he says, Talk about these laws. When you sit at home, when you walk on the road, when you lie down, when you get up, tie them as symbols on your hands, bind them on your foreheads, write them on the door frames of your houses and on your gates. In modern terms, put a post-it note in your car, set a reminder on your phone, talk about it to the dog. Remember to remember. Plan to remember. So when the Bible constantly tells us to be overflowing with thankfulness or to give thanks in all circumstances, remember, plan to remember, to give thanks. And if in every repetition of nature we can hear God's voice saying, do it again, we will constantly be reminded of his care for us. God's delight to do it again in every leaf on every tree, in every lungful of oxygen, every cloud, every pattern in nature. We hear God's echo of do it again, do it again, do it again. But to finish off, there's a bit of an elephant in the room here that I need to address, a big issue I'm ignoring. Right? The whole point of this whole Christianity thing, right, is that there's a miracle. There's at least one really big one. Right? That's not the end of the story. If you don't know what happens after the cross, then keep reading in the New Testament. It's amazing. Right? The resurrection. How can I be so enthusiastic about the laws of nature and yet believe in something so obviously opposed to them as the resurrection of Jesus? Well, the first thing to note is that laws of nature, while that's a modern term, as a scientific sounding thing, they aren't recent news that nature has certain patterns to them. I was reminded of this recently. I teach first-year students. One of the courses is about how to write properly. And as a part of that, they wrote some essays in person, so we knew that there was no AI. And marking those, some rather odd sentences turned up. I'd like to share some of those with you because they are funny. Quote, one of the most important factors is to have a healthy health. Space is one of the biggest mysteries in the world. Thanks, mate. This one's great. Have you ever felt butterflies in your stomach? Scientists have discovered that these may not be figures of speech. Suggests that some people are really eating butterflies. Whole and live. They're still... Anyway. This one's great. The topic was you have a scientific area of research. You're talking to, say, a politician. Convince them that public funds should be used to research this particular topic. Anyway, I assume this person meant to say, Dear Distinguished Member of Parliament. What they unfortunately wrote was, Dear Extinguished Member of Parliament. Which is either a mistake or a great sledge, a really first-class sledge. Anyway, this is the one that actually is relevant and not just me making fun of some students. Sorry, it's really dumb. Okay. Quote, for decades, even centuries, death has been a big occurrence within the everyday world and scientific world, which would seem to suggest that death was discovered sometime in the late Renaissance. The fact that dead people stay dead is not something that we recently discovered. I mean, that's what makes it a miracle. So, the question of what does modern science say about the resurrection is the same as the thing we've always said about the resurrection. If it happened, it would have to be a miracle. There are patterns, there are repetitions in nature. What should we do with these patterns? Well, we think that we can use them to make inferences. It's not a coincidence that I keep dropping things and they fall to the floor. So, they don't just pick a random direction and take off in that direction and just by chance everything happens to choose downwards. There's a deeper reason for this pattern. I'll quote Chesterton again. One elephant having a trunk was odd, but all elephants having trunks looked like a plot. If we can't reason like this is what usually happens, so this is what's going to happen next. If we can't reason like that, right, then it's kind of pointless to try to understand anything in nature. But, says David Hume, the Scottish philosopher, if we can and should reason like this, then how are we going to believe in miracles? If what's happened before is our best approach to what's happened next, then we shouldn't ever believe in miracles, says David Hume. However, Hume undermines this argument in another context. If you think you've got a pattern, you think you've spotted a pattern in nature, you do have to worry about whether you've made the right generalization. It's a bit like solving a puzzle. Have you really incorporated all the clues? Have you found the real pattern or just part of it? And in fact, in science, this happens quite a lot. We observe some repetition in nature, we infer some pattern, right? A law of nature, everything seems to fit, and then we discover an anomaly, something that doesn't fit with the old pattern. And what we do next is not what Hume recommends and say, well, we have to go with the pattern, because that's what always happens. Sometimes the new information is evidence of a bigger pattern, a super pattern. There's a bigger, more grand, more unified super pattern in which this thing that at the moment looks like an anomaly is actually not an exception, it's just part of a bigger rule. This is exactly the point of miracles. Take Jesus walking on water. The conclusion of that should not be, well, I guess gravity just turns off every now and then and Jesus got lucky. But the conclusion of that, if you were supposed to believe based on the story of Jesus walking on water that this whole gravity thing's not really a thing, then of course that's rather unbelievable. But that's not the question. The question is not whether there's a pattern called gravity. Of course there is. The question is what we've seen in the life of Jesus, is that pointing to a super pattern, a bigger pattern, a bigger picture of reality in which both gravity's usual hold and Jesus walking on water are both part of the logic, part of the internal pattern. And to decide that, we can't just appeal to the old pattern and say, well, no. Right? Gravity's usual operation is part of the old pattern, but it's part of the super pattern as well. We're going to have to consider the logic of the super pattern and also the historical evidence. Now, if you were here last night, you'll be shocked that I've come this far through the talk without quoting C.S. Lewis, so allow me to rectify that right now. In his book, Miracles, right, Lewis compares a miracle with something surprising happening in a story. He is, of course, a novelist, amongst other things, so this is the sort of thing he appeals to quite a bit. Quote, some people probably think of the resurrection as a desperate last-moment expedient to save the hero from a situation that had got out of the author's control. The reader may set their mind at rest. If I thought miracles were like that, I would not believe them. If miracles have occurred, they have occurred because they are the very thing this universal story is about. They are not exceptions, however rarely they occur, nor irrelevancies. They are precisely the chapters on which this great story, on which the plot turns. Death and resurrection are what this story is about. And had we eyes to see it, this has been hinted on every page, met us in some disguise at every turn, and even been muttered in conversations between such minor characters, if they are minor characters, as the vegetables. If you have until now disbelieved in miracles, it's worth pausing a moment to consider whether this is not because you thought you'd understood what the whole story is about. Atoms, space and time, economics and politics. Are they the main plot? Are you certain you're right? The question, what do the laws say about the resurrection, turns out to be rather boring. What they don't say is, well, resurrections don't happen. You have to add something to the laws of nature. You have to say only these laws of nature rule in reality, and that's not something science can possibly say. No, what the laws of nature say is, if the resurrection happened, it would have to be a miracle, right? Which is, of course, the whole point. No one thinks that resurrections just happen from time to time. Death has been a big occurrence for centuries, you know. If Jesus is not raised, then the laws of nature are the whole show. and the universe is your prison. The laws of nature then are simply the guards. They tell you where to go and what to do. They made you by accident, sustain you for as long as you're lucky, and one day will destroy you, reuse your matter, and erase your memory forever. But if Jesus is raised from the dead, and that's a question for history, not for science, the question is not what do the laws of nature say about the resurrection? The question is, what does the resurrection say about the laws of nature? What is this super pattern? What is the grand story in which this resurrection will appear inevitable, not as an exception? If Jesus was raised from the dead, then we've had a glimpse of this super pattern. Nature is not our prison. Nature is our sibling. We have the same father. Nature is a fellow creature obedient to God. The resurrection is the first fruits of a new harvest. Nature made you by God's command, sustains you according to God's faithfulness, and one day we'll hear God's voice to do something different. Just as in obedience it does the same thing now. Do it again. So, let me finish up. What are the laws of nature? Why does this universe around us keep repeating? Why are there so many leaves on so many trees? Well, it's God's faithfulness. And it's God's delight in the beauty that He has created. Do it again. Do it again. And it is showing us that this is not our prison. Nature is God's fellow servant. So tomorrow, remember to remember. Look at the world around you. Look at nature around you. See the ordinary repetitions of nature and think, do it again. Do it again. Hear God's voice saying, do it again. And be thankful for the way that He has looked after you, preserved you, and sustained you. I'm going to pray for us. Father, we thank You for Your word, and we thank You for Your world. We pray that this week You will teach us to be more thankful every day, that we will live in Your presence by having Your truth always in front of us, always at the front of our attention, that we will not look in worry to the things we cannot control, but look to Your care in even the smallest things around us, as Jesus said, to look at the flowers. Father, help make us more thankful to You every day. Amen.